Okay, so let's get started. We've looked through quite a bit of material for today. Research papers, articles, but also some really personal stories people have shared, online or in talks.
Yeah, a real mix.
And what we want to do is try and unpack something that feels really big and honestly very human. It's about what it's like trying to navigate life when, your roots are in one culture, but you're living day to day in another.
It's that whole experience of being an immigrant, finding your identity, trying to feel like you belong somewhere.
Exactly. And what's clear from everything we read is it's not just one story. It's complex. So many different experiences, different feelings.
Full of challenges, definitely, but also like surprising moments and deep emotions.
So we're going to try and pull out the key ideas, the things that really stood out to us.
Sounds good. Where should we start?
Well, one thing that comes up again and again in so many different ways is this feeling of living two lives almost.
Right, or being sort of caught between two worlds. That phrase pops up a lot.
Yeah, stuck in the middle. And there's this tension, isn't there? Between what you lose and what you gain.
Definitely. The sources talk about that a lot. There's a real sense of loss.
Yeah.
Losing touch with your country, maybe the language gets a bit rusty, the culture isn't second nature anymore, those easy friendships you grew up with.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, there's so much gain. A whole new country to explore, maybe new languages, new people, new ways of seeing things, new knowledge.
It's like you're constantly balancing the books.
Right.
Big debits, big credits.
Totally. And it's not just some abstract idea. It shows up in like really small everyday things. One piece talks about this constant need for translation.
And not just language translation, right?
No, exactly. It's translating culture too.
Yeah.
Like having to consciously remember how dates are written differently. You see 08.06.06 and your brain thinks June 8th, but here it's August 6th.
Oh, yeah, I can see that. Or like feet and inches instead of meters. Fahrenheit instead of Celsius.
All that stuff. Or even just knowing the difference between holidays like Memorial Day versus, I don't know, Labor Day back home. It's this constant mental juggling act.
Yeah, it takes energy. And then there's that feeling, quite a few people mention this, of being kind of behind.
Behind. How so? Like you always need to catch up on the practical stuff that everyone else just seems to get. Asking basic questions about things feels, I don't know, awkward sometimes.
Yeah, like you're lagging. Or maybe you feel a bit out of date asking about things that seem obvious.
It makes the new place feel a bit hard to read sometimes, especially the unspoken rules.
Definitely. But, okay, here's a twist that one source pointed out, which I found really interesting.
Okay.
That feeling of not knowing things, of having to ask those basic questions. Strangely, it can make you feel younger.
Younger? How does that work?
Right. It's like this sense of rejuvenation because you are learning everything fresh, exploring like a kid almost,
Yeah.
starting from scratch.
Okay, so it's like a forced new beginning that keeps you on your toes, keeps you learning. Exactly. So that duality, that feeling, maybe a bit behind, it isn't all bad. It could be this weirdly revitalizing experience, like a second chance to learn the world.
That's a hopeful way to look at it. But even with that potential upside, the emotional side of things can be really tough. Homesickness, feeling isolated. The sources really dig into that.
Oh, absolutely. Memory plays such a huge part. It's not just remembering things. One person called it an interference. Like it actively pulls you back.
Interference? How?
Through your senses, mostly. Like you see some water, maybe just a lake, and boom, your mind pictures the Adriatic Sea. Or clouds look like mountains from home.
Wow.
Or even just a smell, like cigarette smoke apparently, could just instantly transport someone back. It's visceral.
That sounds intense, makes that pull of home feel very real. And connected to that, I guess, is nostalgia.
Yeah, nostalgia. That's a tricky one in the sources. It's obviously a real feeling, missing people, places, maybe even just the specific way people joke around in your hometown.
Yeah.
But it's also sometimes called a pleasant lie.
A pleasant lie, meaning...
Meaning you kind of romanticize the past or the home country from a distance.
Yeah.
Everything seems better, maybe, than it actually was when you were living there. The air smells sweeter, the hills look pretty.
Right, rose-tinted glasses. And going back for a visit is suggested as a way to kind of bridge those two lives, but...
But, as the sources say, it's often expensive, just not realistic for a lot of people. So that feeling lingers. And alongside it, especially when you first arrive or if you're a student, there's often this deep loneliness, isolation.
For sure. Feeling like an outsider. Maybe you're doing great at work or school, but socially, you feel invisible. There was one really powerful account about someone acing their studies in the U.S., but feeling completely unseen socially compared to back home.
Oof. Yeah. And social media.
Yeah.
It gives you this connection, but it's thin, isn't
No,
it?
totally. You see photos, updates, but it's not the same as actually being there, talking to people face to face. It can make you feel even more alone sometimes, I think, after you log off.
And this is where belonging becomes so important in the research. It's not just a nice to have.
No, it's fundamental. It directly impacts your health, your well-being, feeling like you're seen, like you're part of things, that you matter in your new environment. It's crucial.
So if it's that important, how do people find it? Especially when you don't have that automatic shared background, same history, same culture, family nearby.
Well, the sources really stress actively rebuilding a community. Finding genuine friends is huge.
Making new connections from scratch.
Yeah. Joining clubs, groups, getting involved locally, those become the ways you build your new network. And for some people, just having those friends, living what feels like a normal life, like their peers, that becomes their proof.
This is belonging.
Yeah, like internal evidence for themselves that they do fit in, that they do belong here now.
Makes sense. It's like you're gathering clues that you're okay, you're integrated.
Yeah.
And the flip side, the sources say, is if you don't make those connections, it really blocks that feeling of belonging. Makes it super hard to feel settled.
And this whole search for belonging, it's tied up with figuring out your cultural identity, right? Which brings us to that idea of being bicultural or having a hyphenated identity.
All right, that comes up a lot.
Yeah.
The idea isn't necessarily that you ditch your old identity completely. It's more about blending.
Blending your heritage culture with the culture of the place you now live, and maybe creating something new, a kind of third identity that's uniquely yours.
Exactly. Not just one or the other, but a mix. And people do this differently based on the accounts. Some really dive deep into the host culture.
Like how?
Watching local TV, eating the food, going to all the events. It's a conscious effort to feel American or British or wherever they are. Sometimes that feeling is important regardless of their actual legal status.
Okay, and others?
Others try to find more of a balance. They'll take parts of the new culture, but also work really hard to keep their own traditions alive, their core identity.
Hmm.
Like one person talked about making sure their kids learn the traditions from back home, even while living a fully American life.
That makes sense. Trying to get the best of both worlds, maybe. And there's this term, cultural frame switching.
Yeah, the ability to sort of shift between your different cultural mindsets depending on who you're with or what the situation is, it's a skill that people who are bicultural often develop.
But it's not always easy to hold on to that dual identity, is it? There's pushback sometimes.
Definitely. The sources point out, especially somewhere like the U.S., there's this history of being suspicious of hyphenated Americans.
Yeah.
Like, leaders in the past literally saw it as disloyal.
Wow. The idea that you couldn't be loyal to two places at once.
Exactly. And that suspicion, sadly, still echoes today. It comes out in discrimination, stereotypes, those little daily cuts, microaggressions that make people feel like outsiders no matter how hard they try to fit in.
Yeah, you hear those stories, like the one about the boss making fun of someone's accent, saying, "Oh, that's how I hear you."
Ugh. Yeah. That stuff is incredibly hurtful. It just instantly signals you're different, you don't belong, even if you've lived there for years.
And language is obviously a massive piece of this whole puzzle.
Huge. Being able to speak the language well is just critical for integrating socially, for getting help when you need it, like mental health services, for finding opportunities.
And it can create weird dynamics in families too, right? Like kids having to translate important documents for their parents.
Yeah, that puts a lot of pressure on the kids. And generally, language barriers can just shut so many doors, educationally, professionally.
So beyond identity and language, there are other sort of concrete challenges people face. And this is where resilience really matters.
For sure. Like just finding a job. That comes up a lot.
Yeah.
Having trouble getting hired without local work experience.
Right. You might be highly qualified, but if your experience is from elsewhere, it's hard to get that first break. It's a common struggle. And then there's that other kind of culture shock you mentioned, not just moving to a new place, but going back home after years away.
Yeah, because you've changed, and maybe home has changed too. It's not the same place you left. One person said they felt like a tourist in their own hometown after decades away.
That must be disorienting. Another big challenge, especially within families, is this thing called intergenerational cultural dissonance, ICD.
Yeah, ICD. That's when parents hold really strongly to the traditional values from their home country. But their kids, growing up in the new place, naturally pick up the values of the society around them.
And that causes friction.
Big time. It can lead to a lot of conflict in the family. And the research shows it can be tough on the kids' well-being. partly because it can weaken the bond between parents and children.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And the sources are really clear, too. Experiencing discrimination, being made to feel different. It directly harms your well-being, your sense of belonging. It's a major risk factor for mental health issues.
Absolutely. But on the flip side, the research also highlights what helps build resilience and protects mental health. Strong family bonds, family cohesion, that's a big protective factor.
Okay. And family conflict is a risk factor, presumably.
Exactly. And staying connected with people back home, those transnational ties that can be mixed bag. Sometimes it helps, gives support, keeps you grounded. Other times it can add stress.
Interesting. And the community matters, too.
Yeah, the general vibe of the place you live, the cultural environment, social support, language accessibility, even how many other people from similar backgrounds live nearby, the ethnic density, all that can influence mental health and belonging.
Wow, so many factors. There was one finding about why people migrate.
Oh yeah, that was fascinating. Apparently moving because of personal or family problems back home seems linked to a higher risk of depression later on, compared to moving mainly for economic reasons.
So the reason you leave matters for how you cope later?
It seems so, which makes sense, I guess. And then there's just personal resilience, the stuff you learn by going through it all.
Like what?
Learning you need to empower yourself, figure things out on your own, set boundaries, just knowing you can get through hard times because you already have.
Building that inner strength.
Yeah. And there's that one really lovely account about letting go of material things. This person realized, after moves and the pandemic, that real happiness wasn't in owning stuff.
Where was it then?
It came from inside and from connecting with people, not possessions. That's a pretty profound shift in perspective, right? Learn through experience.
Definitely. And just appreciating the differences, too, not just putting up with them.
Right. Learning new languages, having all these different experiences. The sources frame these as assets, things that make you richer and make the society you're in richer, too.
So when you put it all together, this whole journey, it's not like you arrive and then you're done adapting.
Not at all.
Yeah.
It's constant.
Mm.
The sources show immigrants are always evolving, changing, absorbing new things, weaving it all together.
Building their own unique culture, really, a mix of where they came from and where they are now, but holding on to what's core for them.
Exactly. And being on that, margin of a new culture, it's tough, but it gives you this unique viewpoint.
A double perspective, one source called it. Seeing more because you're not just in the center.
Yeah. And that can bring a kind of freedom, actually. Room for self-discovery.
So ultimately, feeling like you belong. It's not just about having the right papers, although that's obviously incredibly important.
Crucial, yeah. But it's also shaped so much by the community around you, how open it is, how welcoming, and your own ability to make those real human connections.
It really is this ongoing process, a kind of dance, maybe, between holding onto roots and putting down new ones, translating, adapting, losing things, gaining things, all happening at once.
Yeah, weaving together all these different threads of who you are and what you've experienced into something completely new and unique.
We've really covered a lot today, haven't we? From that initial feeling of living two lives, the emotional ups and downs, to how people navigate their identity, build resilience, and find that sense of belonging against the odds.
Yeah, and how vital that feeling of belonging is. How it's shaped by so many things, big systemic stuff like status and discrimination, but also really personal things like friends and family, and just the feel of the neighborhood you live in.
So maybe a final thought to leave everyone with, based on all this. When you think about how complex it is to stay connected to where you came from while building a life and maybe this blended, hyphenated identity somewhere new, what does home even mean then?
That's a huge question, and maybe tied to that. Where, if anywhere, can someone find a feeling of complete belonging? Is that even the goal?
Right. And maybe also, what's our collective responsibility here, both for immigrants navigating this and for the society receiving them? How do we create places where having these dual identities isn't just okay, but is actually seen as valuable, as something that makes the whole community richer?
Yeah, how do we foster environments where everyone feels they can bring their whole selves and truly belong? Lots to think about.